Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Friday, July 5th, 2024, and I welcome you to the Stonewall Research 2 channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I hope you had a nice holiday if you're here in the United States and you didn't blow your fingers off. That would be a bad thing if that happened, so don't do that. But have yourself a nice holiday weekend here, and be careful. Alright guys, well anyway, since July 4th has come and gone here, I thought I might talk about the Iroquois, somewhere on there, and the Great Law of Peace. Okay, because my interest in this is because of the Iroquois. It's because of their influence, apparently, in some people's opinion, on the formation of our basic rights and Constitution, through the founding fathers' knowledge of the form of government that the Iroquois had, went so far as to actually they had to sort of acknowledge that because of the various letters and things that were spoken about by the founding fathers. So apparently, historians, it says here, the historians in the 20th century have suggested that the Iroquois system of government influenced the development of the U.S. government, although the extent and nature of this influence has been disputed. Bruce Johansen proposes that the Iroquois had a representative form of government. And, whatever way you want to slice it, they did. But it says right here, in 1988, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution to recognize the influence of the Iroquois League upon the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Okay, so they had to pass a revolution. And here it says in 1987, Cornell University held a conference on a link between the Iroquois government and the U.S. Constitution. So, who else commented about it? Charles C. Mann did here. This is some historian, said the voluminous records we have for the constitutional debates of the late 1780s contain no significant references to the Iroquois. And so it says there are ample European precedents to the democratic institutions of the U.S., whatever they're talking about, Magna Carta, parliaments, or whatever it might be. Of course, this Greek Senate, which is what, our sort of taken from that sort of mindset of ancient Rome there. But here's what Charles C. Mann said. Charles C., in reply to this sort of critique, journalist Charles C. Mann wrote that while he agreed that the specific form of government created for the U.S. was not at all like that of the Iroquois, available evidence does support a cultural argument that the well-known democratic spirit had much to do with colonial contact with the Indians of the eastern seaboard, including and especially the Iroquois. Okay, so notwithstanding the Algonquin peoples, okay, and this is roughly the area of influence of the Algonquin, as you can see on this map here. It's absolutely huge. Okay, and they were seafaring people who did a lot of harvesting in the oceans and rivers and lakes and streams and stuff like that. So in any case, the Algonquin had their own sort of form of government themselves, and I've heard people refer to them as being Hopewell too, because apparently, as I suspected, just through my own incidental research about the Iroquois being the Hopewell. So they say here the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, are the descendants of the Hopewell culture, a network of Native American cultures that flourished in the eastern and midwestern United States from 100 BC to 500 CE. Okay, so anyway, there's this whole sort of, nice sort of holistic, sappy thing about getting this great, being inspired by the great law of peace of the Iroquois, and how they had this special, had to put this special, whatever it was there in Congress to acknowledge this, etc., etc. Well, I mean, how swell were the Iroquois? I mean, that's great. They had this sort of democratic sort of society, they say, with the Great Law of Peace. So the Haudenosaunee Confederacy founded a Great Law of Peace. The law could declare a basic respect for the rights of all people. The Haudenosaunee shared this belief with Benjamin Franklin, who was very interested in the structure of the Confederacy. Okay, so that's where they get all this sort of reference to, how it influenced our government and stuff. But, as the title of this video sort of states about how, some believe, some historians believe that, they were imperialistic and, expansionary to the extent where, they eliminated a lot of people who they thought were, standing in their way. As there seems to be a bit of greed involved with this, with reference to trade. Okay, so as I was saying in previous videos that dealt with the Hopewell and the Adena culture, which now we know, if anybody doesn't know, haven't ever seen any of my videos or read any of the research or anything from the University of Indiana about the Adena and Hopewell being contemporaries, living in the same sort of culture with this sort of social dynamic going on, where the Adena, these rather large people of a different morphology altogether, humanoid morphology, were the ruling class. So, and these, the Iroquois are the descendants from, the Hopewell, who we're assuming by the type of structure in the society, with the ruling class being these rather large people who are probably who the reference of big man is referring to. But how good were these Adena people too? I mean, were they greedy and, with trade, and they got a lot of wealth and power from this trading, because the Hopewell exchange system, and you can see the interaction sphere here, which covers just a gigantic swath of the eastern part of North America here. So with all these different Hopewell cultures and other cultures that engage in this trading tradition with the Hopewell and now the Adena and Hopewell, it's not just the Hopewell. So it's just funny to me that, when the Iroquois, when somehow some sort of schism happened in this society where it was totally eliminated somewhere in the past, before 1,000 years ago, when they say that the Iroquois migrated from the Ohio Valley to New York some 1,000 years ago. So before that, not too long before that, was the end of the Adena and Hopewell cultures, which happened at the end of something went on there, and probably some internal schism, and that's why the Iroquois had to, get out of there and go somewhere else, and and probably were loyal to the Adena, who were these, probably oversaw all of the trade and everything else going on with the Hopewell tradition there that they know well about, but has to be the Adena and Hopewell now. So at their direction, I'm sure. But okay, so who did the Iroquois get rid of, through their own myths and legends? Who did they, because this is my main interest as far as the stone walls go. Okay, so it was who? The stone giants, come on, folks, there's no such thing as stone giants or even stone coats. Do you think stone-made armor would be comfortable wearing that? I mean, I've worn body armor myself, like flak level body armor, with a full gear, everything, including a Type 3 NATO helmet. And so, it's, my gear was, heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. But wearing stone would be very uncomfortable. So I'm not talking about giants made of stone or wearing stone armor or whatever it was. Okay, they dug one of these giants up in somewhere in Indiana who had copper armor on, a copper helmet and everything else. They found the 20th century photographs of it, so there's no denial of that. I wasn't suffering from gigantism either, because you're not running around swinging axes and wearing armor if you're suffering from gigantism like Wadlow there, Richard Wadlow, or whatever his name was 8-something feet tall, was very frail and everything else, just wouldn't be like that, right? Judging by their skull and that, I mean, anyway, so it's just funny to me. So you can see like the proportion here of, how this looks here. See, blow this up a little bit bigger. I don't know, this proportion is not exactly the same as the other one there, but it's just interesting to me how, see this, the proportion here. Well, here's the Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farmer Adena with a normal sized person, and what these Adena skeletal remains would look like if they were alive today, right? So look at the proportion there. It's just interesting to me. Looks like the proportion's about right there. Okay, but they weren't made of stone. They built the stone walls, dummies. That's why they're called the stone giants. I hate to tell everybody, whether it's mainstream academics, the native peoples, or whatever, they're called the stone giants because they built the stone walls, you ding-dongs. Okay? Not because they were made of, nobody's made of stone. No living thing is made of stone. Some, exoskeleton creatures like crabs and lobsters and stuff. But, no armadillos. No creatures are made of stone. So it couldn't have been creatures made of stone, but it could have been creatures like, like this. Real humanoid creatures. Just they call them the stone giants because they built the stone walls. And for a reason. It probably also had a lot to do with trade and material handling as well. That goes, hand in hand with trade on a large scale. All the material handling, right? There's all sorts of sort of technological designs and equipment and software and everything has to do with material handling, right? There's the kind of logistics required to make it all happen and everything else like that. Okay, well, talk about doing it in ancient times. It's no different, just, without all the equipment, you know. But as much order as they could bring to it, by creating these earthen, mound areas and, structures and, and then stone ones as well, whether it be the old Kentucky stone fort there or, the Georgia fort, stone fort, whatever it is. It's just, when I look at it, I see it, I know it's a trading area. Wherever it appears in the world, it's always the same thing, a trading area. Okay. So anyway, that's my main interest in about how, when the Iroquois first got here, the first thing they had to do was eliminate all of these stone giants, which they did quite hastily. And, that would be, what they considered Algonquin territory. But, okay, so the Iroquois have all the bad giants living in here in, Algonquin territory here, these stone giants, these bad old stone giants. Just, it's kind of funny when you hear the stories from the Algonquins about the giants. They're all good. See this book here, The Good Giants and the Bad Pukwudgies? Well, this is written by an author who studied the history of the Micmac Indians and all the native peoples up and down the coast here who are all Algonquin. And see, all the giants in their stories are good. They're not bad. See? So whenever Ellie Masuri says talking about, the stone giants and and all this kind of other shit and hype and whatnot to get you all worked up about the giants and how bad they were and all kind of stuff. I mean, even from the Iroquois perspective, that's all great, about their great law of peace and all people are, equal, but only internally, see, okay, that they were imperialistic and expansionist. I wonder what cultures in the West seem awfully like that in their more recent histories. Okay, so let's hear another side of the story that you never hear about and that maybe you should hear about, because until you read something like this, you don't know. But this has to do with the expansion era for the Algonquin or the Haudenosaunee people. So let's read a little bit about what this lady historian wrote about that for some reason Wikipedia is taking here as useful material here, and from no one else apparently, but although a few other people, but mainly from this lady here. And this lady's a real lefty too, so it's just interesting what she says here. Okay, so it says here, as far as Iroquois expansion, in Reflections in Bullow's Pond, historian Diana Muir argues that the pre-contact Iroquois were an imperialist, expansionist culture whose cultivation of the corn, bean, squash agricultural complex enabled them to support a large population. That's the three sisters, in their own words, of their crop. They made war primarily against neighboring Algonquin peoples. Yeah, especially the stone giants, who they eliminated promptly. Okay, that's who built it. They didn't build the stone walls. They were honest about it. But they just, they told you about the myth and everything. So just like, they don't want to talk about this part about it too much. Like, for example, a genocide that might have happened here to the rather large people who are all sort of one people, right? So if they eliminated them all, well then that's a bit of a genocide now, isn't it? So just like the people at Galena Canyon, that when Frank C. Hibben did his work there, when they were found, these 25 and 30 foot beautifully made Torreons that all appear to be in rubble now, probably because the U.S. military used them for target practice, because what Hibben found out is that the peaceful Pueblos were the ones who evidently murdered all these people in their sleep and everything, burned their Torreons there and murdered all of them, and took the chief and his wife out and the baby there and bent them over backwards and snapped their heads backwards, as the University of Washington, Washington State University, found out in their study, which I went over on in my Galena Canyon video. Okay, they don't want you to know about that. That's why it's never talked about. That's why it's not an archaeological site that's a destination for tourism or anything like that. They don't want you to know about that story. They don't. So it's similar in that respect. Okay, the Haudenosaunee want to maintain this image of peace and, the great law of peace, and everybody's equal and democratic, and, they adopt a special, recognition and session of Congress and all the kind of other stuff, okay, to make everybody just, hey, kumbaya, and everybody's all happy about it and everything. But let's continue on with what this lady says here. They made war primarily against neighboring Algonquin peoples. Muir uses archaeological data to argue that the Iroquois expansion onto Algonquin lands was checked by Algonquin adoption of agriculture. This enabled them to support their own populations large enough to resist Iroquois conquest. The people of the Confederacy dispute this historical interpretation regarding the League of the Great Peace as the founder of their heritage. So they want to maintain this image of, peace, and they weren't warlike or whatever it is, and just listen to the rest of this. But the Algonquin adoption of culture came by a blonde, blue-eyed giant called Maize, who introduced farming to them of the crop of maize. So that's how their legend goes. The Algonquin legend of maize goes. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed giant gave it to them, who befriended a little boy, and that's how they got their legend, how they got their agriculture, which must have been sometime in the far distant past. So it says here, the Iroquois may be the Quebec described in the oral legends of the Micmac nation of eastern Canada. Well, Micmacs along the eastern coast, and what would be considered the United States as well too. But the Micmac was a large part of Algonquin tribes, so they stretched from New England up into Canada, sort of eastern Canada. These legends relate that the Micmac in the late pre-contact period had gradually driven their enemies, the Quebec, westward across New Brunswick and finally out of the lower St. Lawrence River region. The Micmac named the last conquered land Gaspadec, or last land, from which the French derived Gaspé. The Quebec are generally considered to have been Iroquois, specifically the Mohawk. Their expulsion from Gaspé by the Micmac has been estimated as occurring 1535 to 1600. Around 1535, Jacques Cartier reported Iroquois-speaking groups on the Gaspé Peninsula and along the St. Lawrence River. Archaeologists and anthropologists have defined the St. Lawrence Iroquois as a distinct and separate group, and possibly several discrete groups, living in the villages of Hochelaga, and others nearby, near present-day Montreal, which has been visited by Cartier. By 1608, when Samuel de Champlain visited the area, that part of the St. Lawrence River Valley had no settlements, but was controlled by the Mohawk as a hunting ground. The fate of the Iroquois people that Cartier encountered remains a mystery, and all that can be stated for certain is that when Champlain arrived, they were gone. On the Gaspé Peninsula, Champlain encountered Algonquin-speaking groups. The precise identities of any of these groups is still debated. On July 29, 1609, Champlain assisted his allies in defeating a Mohawk war party by the shores of what is now called Lake Champlain, and again in June 1610, Champlain fought against the Mohawks. So the Mohawks are an Iroquois tribe, a part of the Confederacy. So the Algonquins were busy beating them back here, but that's only after they eliminated all the giants, the stone giants, who were friendly with the Algonquin people. Okay? And many stories of the good giants in Algonquin folklore and mythologies, okay, that you never hear about because it doesn't sell books, by L.A. Marzulli and others want to, say the giants were cannibals and but, most honest people are going to say, hey, they're both good and bad, probably like, just everybody who ever existed. But in any case, there was all these good giants that you never hear about. They were occupying, this space and region is what I'm saying here. So, maybe they were bad to the Iroquois because, hey, I don't want to get pushed out of my home, okay, because you want my territory or whatever. So let's read on here about how the nice, peaceful Iroquois were doing here. So the Iroquois became well known in the southern colonies in the 17th century by this time. After the first English settlement in Jamestown, Virginia, numerous 17th century accounts describe a powerful people known to the Powhatan Confederacy as the Wassawomek and to the French as the Atuhanaran. They were said to come from the north, beyond the Susquehannock territory. Historians have often identified the Massawomek and Atuhanaran as the Haudenosaunee. In 1649, an Iroquois war party consisting mostly of Senecas and Mohawks destroyed the Huron village of Wendake. In turn, this ultimately resulted in the breakup of the Huron nation. With no northern enemy remaining, the Iroquois turned their forces on the neutral nations of the north shore of Lakes Erie and Ontario, the Susquehannocks, their southern neighbor. Then they destroyed other Iroquois language tribes, including the Erie, to the west in 1654 over competition for the fur trade. Then they destroyed the Mohicans. After their victory, the last of the Mohicans, after their victories, they reigned supreme in an area from the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean, from the St. Lawrence River to the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, so it sounds to me their main goal was to secure their control over trade. Okay, so driven by this imperialism, driven by greed to control the fur trade, they had to eliminate all these people down to the last man, right? Last of the Mohicans, right? Yeah. All men are equal internally. Externally, anything goes. So just murder them wholesale and slaughter everybody, because, hey, you gotta protect your own people here. So Doesn't sound like they're too nice to me, if this is true. In 1649, okay, so we read that already. Michael of Valhalla has argued their success in conquering and subduing surrounding nations had paradoxically weakened a native response to European growth, thereby becoming victims of their own success. The five nations of the League established a trading relationship with the Dutch at Fort Orange, modern Albany, New York, trading furs for European goods, an economic relationship that profoundly changed their way of life and led to much overhunting of beavers. Okay, so here, where at one time the native peoples, the ancient, far more ancient native peoples, were managing forests and managing wildlife and managing the aquaculture that they did, and managing fish and everything else. So they were managing the environment, conscientiously managing the environments too. The Iroquois here, who were busy killing everybody greedily, over greed, control of the fur trade, which the Dutch were much into. As I've talked about before, the Dutch wanted their people to become farmers over here, but there was no money in that, and very poor growing conditions in the mountainous areas on the East Coast, Long Island being an exception. But the Montaukets were controlled Long Island, all of Long Island, and they had to be destroyed first, like almost immediately upon the colonists and settlers getting here. They had to destroy all of King Mongatuxie's kids, grandkids, or great-grandkids, or whatever they were there, because they were all fierce fighters, like their great-great-grandfather. So they had to get rid of them first. So, that's what the Dutch were mainly into. They wanted their people to be farmers, but there was no money in it. So they engaged with the fur trade with the Indians. So as a result, they overhunted beavers. So that's not any sort of conservancy going on there, or any sort of conscientious conservancy going on there. So, how good are these Iroquois people? So, in the Great Law of Peace, withstanding. Okay, so this is unimportant here about some villages they established, and they were all abandoned in 1701 along the northern shores of Lake Ontario for some reason. Over the years 1670 to 1710, the Five Nations achieved political dominance of much of Virginia west of the Fall Line and extending to the Ohio River Valley in present-day West Virginia and Kentucky. As a result of the Beaver Wars, they pushed Siouan-speaking tribes out and reserved the territory as a hunting ground by right of conquest. They finally sold to British colonists their remaining claim to the land south of the Ohio in 1768 at the Treaty of Fort Stanwix. Historian Pekka Hamalainen writes of the League, there had never been anything like the Five Nations League in North America. No other indigenous nation or confederacy had ever reached so far, conducted such an ambitious foreign policy, or commanded such fear and respect. The Five Nations blended diplomacy, intimidation, and violence as the circumstances dictated, creating a measured instability that only they could navigate. Their guiding principle was to avoid becoming attached to any single colony, which would restrict their options and risk exposure to external manipulation. So, boy, are these some calculating peoples here, and with no real allegiance to anybody, can just throw anybody aside at any time. And what their main goals were, even at risk of destroying environmentally, the main source for their income and everything by, over hunting and whatever it is that they were doing, which never happened before in the past with the peoples there before, because they understood something about conservancy. Obviously, as reported in Charles C. Mann's books, 1491, Revelations in the Americas Before the Arrival of Columbus. Okay, so, we're not talking about the same peoples here. We're talking about a more developed society, a more trade-based economy type society. And when this lady says that had never been anything like the Five Nations League, well, I beg to differ. What do you call this thing going on here? And obviously, whatever tribes were in the Confederation with the Iroquois, you could be sure that those were the other Hopewell tribes that were probably loyal to these Adena people, who are just, greedy and maybe as bloodthirsty as them, Maybe it's all great for anybody internally in the society there, but externally it seems like, all men are, have, equal rights, except if you're outside of the society, then you don't have any rights, okay? And so, where they had the great law of peace, we had a great white fleet to go around the world, at the turn of the 19th century to 20th century there, a little after the turn of the century, after the Boxer Rebellion. We had to send the great white fleet around the world to show everybody that, hey, we're somebody to reckon with here. Okay, that's our great law of peace, our foreign policy and, foreign detente here. It was started off with this great white fleet, which they sent around the world to show, American naval power. We built all of these battleships and painted them white and sent them around the world to visit all the countries of the world to show, what America was all about in the early 20th century. Okay, so anyway, guys, I just thought you might want to know about some other notions about the Iroquois before you start believing all these sappy stories about how we took from them and how it's all great and they're all peaceful and, they don't agree to this lady's criticisms here, because, hey, they're all about peace and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, just like the peaceful Pueblos who genocided the Galena people, and just like the peaceful Paiutes who genocided all the Lovelock people, because the Lovelock people just didn't live in a cave. It wasn't just a couple of people living in a cave. It was an entire people who lived in that area there. Okay, similar to the story of the Galena people. Okay, it came time where, who knows, maybe the Paiutes and the Pueblos were in cahoots with each other and decided to eliminate all those people. And that's what Hove and Weep is, and the salmon ruins and everything. They weren't made by Pueblos or Paiutes or any of those people at all. They were made by these people who were genocided there that they don't want us knowing about. Okay, that's what C.W. Saran was trying to tell us. Okay, and just like they don't want you to know about the Iroquois people here and, busy eliminating all of these people completely down to the last man, woman, and child. Okay, so, hey, they're all great internally there, but I think, your foreign policy may dictate or may have something to do with how your inner constructs work, how your insides work, So, anyways, I thought you might like to know about that stuff there, being that it's 4th of July and how much the Iroquois contributed to the Great Law of Peace, contributed to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, right after the Declaration of Independence. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that and think about it, okay? And what might have been really going on in the past that they don't know about really and are guessing at, and until recently didn't know a lot about. So anyway, think about it. And please do hit the like button, and please do subscribe if you're not a subscriber. We talk about some interesting things here. All right. So anyway, Bugcat7 signing out. Peace and happy 4th of July.